Yo, yo, yo. Joe Idoni here. Welcome in, golf fans, to your comprehensive preview for the 152nd Open Championship. I have a guest alongside me tonight. We are going to break down everything you need to know, all the storylines going on right now in the world of professional golf from all tours. We will cover some course-specific insights and stuff that we know about Royal Troon. We'll go through players. We've got it all covered for you on this episode of Preferred Lines. Let's go.
Well, 9-iron for him. They're going to go nuts when he hits this thing.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
All right, let's do this, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. We're here to preview the final major of the championship of the season. It's a bit bittersweet, if I'm being honest with you, here in the middle of July, but excited to do so nonetheless. I have to mention before we get started, this show is brought to you importantly and solely by the good people over at Rotoballer PGA team. The amount of content that is going to come out of the Rotoballer network this week, upcoming, leading into the 152nd Open, is going to be like no other website out there. You've got everything from myself. I will have 4 articles up this week, access to the entire team. The promo code that you're going to want to use there is LINES. That will get you 10% off any subscription that you want. You want to go annual, you want to go weekly, you want to go monthly. We still have a lot of golf left to be played, including the run up to the Tour Championship and the Olympics this season. It's no better time than now to jump on board. We would appreciate you. If you enjoy this video or like this channel, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up. These major championships weeks, I harp on it every time. They're extremely important to those who create golf content and put a lot of effort into these shows to bring to you each and every week. So if you want to share it with a friend, that would be fantastic. I'm so happy to have you guys along here with me and happy to bring along our guest. He is an editor. He is a writer. He is a tipster. He does it all for the sporting life. He's coming to you now from across the pond over there in the UK. Thrilled to welcome him back onto the show. Truly one of the when I talk about market movers, this guy puts an article up. It is moving lines across the ocean. Welcome back to the show. It's awesome to have you on, Ben Coley. How are you tonight?
Hi, Joe. Yeah, I'm good after that intro. How can you not be? Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been a long time since we've done this. I think, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, we did it for the first event coming out of the pandemic in 2020. And you look at how far you've come. It looks a bit fancier than it did back then.
Well, thank you very much. We were one of the first guests on this show. Is when nobody knew about this show. You're one of the people that actually said yes. So thank you so much for having us once again on an extremely busy weekend over there. You're covering Wimbledon now. You've got a big soccer match tomorrow, or should I say football? But thank you for making some time. We're happy to have you on this show and give a little context, support, and information for the Open Championship next week.
Yeah, I'll talk about the Open all day long. So yeah, glad to be here. It's a fantastic event. And I can't wait to get started on Thursday.
You know, I mentioned final major of the season. I have to say it's a bit bittersweet, and it came up kind of quick on me. Like, it feels like it's been such a long grind, and those of us who do content since January, but we're in the middle of July now, and frankly, the Tour Championship on the PGA Tour is a complete debacle that I have very little interest in. The Olympics is kind of hit or miss. I'm sure I'll get excited when it comes around, but I'm a bit saddened by the feeling that we have half a year left, and it feels like this is the last major of the season. You ready to wrap this thing up, or are you sad as well that the golf is kind of done after this week, it feels like?
Yeah, you know very well. It's a very intense few months, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you go from one major to the next, and in some ways, what happens between them can get a little bit lost. I think. Scotty Sheffer needed a break, I think, and he's taken one, but that's probably not ideal for the product. And generally speaking, I would say it was better when we had the PGA in August. I know there were some issues around that, but it felt like it had an identity, and it just took us a little bit closer to the next one. And instead we got what is it, 9 months or something until the Masters? As if the build up to the Masters isn't hyped enough already. You add another month on there, so yeah, it's a shame. And obviously in a non-Ryder Cup year, I'm one of the dozen people in the UK who does care about the President's Cup, but
Sure.
it's not a Ryder Cup year, and it's it's a shame. But hopefully we get a belter of an Open. I mean, last year I certainly, it's fine if you're on Brian Harman, but those of us who weren't, the last major you're going to get in 9 months, and you feel like it's over pretty early on Sunday. So I'd like something a little bit more dramatic, or I'll take the winner, either of those two.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we'll get something like we saw last time at Royal Troon. It's unlikely, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to talk about preparation for Royal Troon. There's 2 tours, 2 events, 2 big events going on this week. You have the Scottish Open, which is at sort of a modern style links course, relatively forgiving, but it's not quite like a course built in the 1800s like Royal Troon. And then you have Valderrama, right, which is like the total opposite, which is extremely demanding and tight off the tee. Both are starkly contrasting types of golf courses. Which do you think potentially presents a better run-in for players in preparation for players who are going to be playing next week?
I don't think there's any doubt that it would be the Scottish Open. I think even if you take away the characteristics of the course, you've got the weather. You're probably staying, it's not that far between where they are this week and Troon. They'll be staying on the property or close to the property next week, so they will be moving. But you're talking an hour and a half or something like that. So I think there are loads of little advantages. You look, since they started playing the Scottish Open on a links golf course, and really, I think it's 9 of the last 13 had played in the Scottish Open. But when you look at the ones who hadn't, you've got players who are at their absolute peak. Francesco Molinari had 2 wins, 2 seconds in his previous 5 starts. Jordan Spieth had won the Travelers. Zach Johnson, I think, he got 3 top 10s his last 3 PGA Tour starts. So ignoring the US Open. The one exception was Shane Lowry, who was playing a course he'd known since he was a kid and the type of golf that he'd played since he was a kid. So when we're looking to sort of retrospectively explain each of these winners, I think most of them either came here totally confident in what they were doing. So Scheffler would be the best example of that, who isn't in Scotland, or they came here with a strong feeling of being prepared on the links. And even someone like Morikawa, who played badly in Scotland, he learned something. He changed the lie angle of his irons, didn't he? And then went to Royal St. George's, and that was worth a lot to him. And it's very difficult to argue that Valderrama will be worth something to everybody. That's not to say for somebody like Tyrrell Hatton, who plays well there, gains a bit of confidence, builds some momentum coming into this week. It's not to say for some of them it won't work out just fine. But if you go back to last year, it's only one year of having done something similar. They went Valderrama, Centurion, Hoylake, and the best live golfer in the Open was Henrik Stenson, who was 13th, who again already knew how to do it. So for the guys who aren't perhaps as comfortable, and Bryson is probably the highest profile example, well, he definitely is. It's, he'd be better off playing in Scotland, but that's where we are.
Okay, so before we get into the course, before we get into the players, the Open Championship, we've got to talk a little bit about the weather. Now, full disclosure, we're recording this just minutes after the 3rd round of the Scottish Open, so Saturday night here, East Coast time. It looks very windy. Early predictions next week, which we could get. That obviously can change at the drop of a hat, but it's the one major championship where I think, Ben, I'm most reluctant to put futures out there. Like, I'll look early in the season and I'll take a couple guys at the Masters and I'll look at where they're playing the PGA and the US Open and I'll try to find a few fits. This, not only do I want to see what unfolds during the summer and the previous 3 majors, but the weather draw can be so completely important here. And whether it plays in 5-mile-an-hour winds or 30-mile-an-hour winds, to me, that can drastically change the type of player skill set that I'm looking for. How does that impact difficulty and handicapping when you come into this event?
Yeah, it's undeniably difficult, and Troon's probably one of the best recent examples of that. I think it's probably something that's not been talked about enough. There was an enormous draw bias here in 2016.
Yes.
Rory McIlroy was up against it from the moment tee times were published. And what's funny about that is that actually when players were coming in from the first round on Thursday, the morning wave, they thought they got it good. And actually, it shows you that how difficult it can be to work out exactly who's going to get the best of it. Because, we'll come on to the course in a bit. This course in particular has sort of 3 distinct sections, which alone, you can be on the wrong part at the wrong time. But what happened in 2016 was that actually the wind kind of picked up a little bit, but it blew downwind the back nine, and that back nine is hard. And all of a sudden, it was a bit of a picnic. And in the end, I think it was 7 of the top 9 and 18 of the top 22 played afternoon Thursday. And Phil Mickelson, I think, what he shoots 62, 63 in the afternoon on Thursday. And by the end of the week, it was him and Henrik away clear. And nobody from that morning wave had any look at winning this tournament. And it's far from the first time. I think when Darren Clark won Royal St George's 2011, 75% of the top 20 came from his side of the draw as well. So the difficulty for people like me and you, Joe, and we're talking examples of it now, is we've got to make our content, and you can't always make it when it's perfect for getting everything. You know, if I could release my preview at any time of day, I think it might be about 4 a.m. on Thursday, but my boss isn't going to stand for that. So we'll make the best of it, I guess.
Yeah, the big names I remember coming into that week were like the players who were playing really well was like Spieth, Day, Dustin Johnson had just won, and they all got kind of wiped out being in that Friday afternoon, which got very hectic. But I want to kind of go over the rest of the leaderboard. Obviously, people will remember sort of Phil and Henrik, the epic 36-hole duel. Henrik finished 20 under par, Phil 17 under par. Then Henrik was 14 shots clear of third, which was J.B. Holmes, Steve Stricker, Rory at -4, Sergio at -4, Tyrrell Hatton at -4. Beef made an appearance and it sort of made some waves at -3. Then you had DJ, Bill Haas, and Sword Keltson at -2. Talk a little bit about the duel. I mean, one of the most epic weekends that we've seen of 36 holes of back and forth, main event title fight feel. Like I mentioned, Henrik was so far clear, and the fact that those two performed and accelerated beyond the field on Sunday, which is the one thing that I'll remember. I mean, Henrik alone gained 9.8 strokes on Sunday while having the lead. Phil gained 7.8 on Sunday of a major championship being won back and didn't win. Like, is one of the craziest endings in terms of finishing second. What were sort of, do you have any lasting memories of that Sunday that you can recall?
Well, me being me, I think one of the main things, I'll confess, I was driving home from a golf trip with my friends that Sunday. But obviously I managed to stay across it. We get really good radio coverage here in the UK as well, which is great. But one of the things that really stays with me is a reminder of the intangibles. That some people would argue you're just wasting your time even trying to work with and use to your advantage. Other people like me would say that that's part of the fun. Henrik Stenson, one of his closest friends passed away pretty much on the eve of the Open in 2016. And he's spoken about it since, that it really, there's a melancholic element, but it really helped him in some ways to produce that performance. And I dare say when he teed off on Sunday, he didn't feel like he felt when he was in the mix for the Open at Muirfield against Mickelson 3 years before that. And there are loads of other factors, and don't get me wrong, the primary factors were that he was a fabulous golfer at the top of his game, playing a golf course where arguably the number one thing is to stay out of the bunkers, and as one of the most precise drivers among the elite golfers, that certainly played to his strengths. But yeah, I suppose there was that. I mean, it was just a fabulous back and forth, played in great spirit between two legendary golfers of vast experience as well. And that's another thing when we talk about the Open, obviously. I think in any of the other three majors, if you had two 40-somethings battling it out on the Sunday, I know it kind of happened at Kiowa, didn't it? There's one 50-something in Phil and a couple of older players behind him, Padraig Harrington in fourth. But it doesn't happen very often, and if it's going to happen, it's the Open. And just one final thing: when you were reading out the names of those people in the mix, or in the mix is the wrong phrase, isn't it? Because there are only two players in the mix. But Soren Kjeldsen and Andrew Johnston are both, as it happens, winners at Valderrama. So maybe that will prove a good preparation after all.
Very interesting. Well, let's get into the course a little bit. And you kind of hit the nail on the head, and it's sort of the way I hear everyone describe it as a sort of a course that is built in 3 acts. So let's kind of go one by one. To start, obviously, Troon, right off the coast in the seawall of Troon, Scotland there. Private golf course, was originally built in 1878. Started as a 5-hole course, I believe, and was expanded into 18 holes in the late 1800s there. This will be the 10th Open Championship, if I have that right, that Troon has hosted. Stenson obviously won in 2016. The previous 6 were actually all Americans that had won at Royal Troon, including Arnold Palmer. I found this funny, who won the 1960 Open, and a grandiose winner's share of 1,400 pounds Arnold Palmer took home from winning. So we've come a lot way in 60 years since then. But yeah, the story of sort of three acts here, broken into a beginning, middle, and a culminating 6-hole finish. Talk to me about what you sort of see in the opening 6-hole stretch at Royal Troon.
Opportunity is the best word to describe it, I think. When the wind is the prevailing wind, I think it's off the right, but it's certainly down. And that is where you've got to make a score. And one of the great things about the Open Championship, one of the underrated great things about it, is everybody tees off one from 6:30 in the morning through to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it enhances the chance that the weather plays a part, for one thing, because you've not got clusters of players teeing off at similar times, but you've also got to play the course the same way. And that means at Troon, there's a strange kind of pressure. And a few players spoke about it back in 2016. It's kind of like, if you get to the 7th hole level par, if it's calm on Thursday, you get to the 7th hole level par, you might be 6 behind, 7 behind players who've played 9 holes. It really is possible to go out in 30 here. So it's a different kind of pressure to the pressure maybe at Portrush, where you've got out of bounds down the left and so on. It's a pressure that says you've got to be on it. And that's going to be a fascinating thing. People who start slowly are going to be facing a bit of a mountain to climb. So that's the story of the first 6 holes, really. The other point, and it's probably a debate for another day, but we do have the longest hole in Open Championship history again, the 6th hole. Now, that record was broken last year. It's been broken again this year. They're going to have to keep breaking it, aren't they? Until something changes. But yeah, so we got the longest par 5, longest hole in Open history there, and then soon after that, the shortest par 3 in the second part of the course.
Yeah, so number 1 through 3, you mentioned it. Start out hot. They're all under 390-yard par 4s. They will all, ironically, and I don't know if this is intentional, play exactly 1 yard shorter than they did in 2016, each of the opening 3 holes. Number 4, pretty easy par 5. You got to make, like, it's very conceivable that you can start 4 under through 4 here. So that sort of culminates the soft opening, I would say, at number 4, because 5 is a relatively difficult hole at 209, a par 3. And then 6, you mentioned, they've stretched out about 25 yards to play 623, longest hole in Open history. You did mention that opening 9 does, in a prevailing wind, typically play somewhat downwind. So I think the distance in having 2 par 5s there could actually be reachable for some players, even at 623. All in all, hot start is completely paramount. Then you get to Act 2, right? It's kind of, I wouldn't say a traditional 9 out, 9 back. You kind of go 6 out, and then you're sort of stuck in this dunes area, which is dramatically different landscape, topography, look, all that, correct?
Yeah, and one of the things about Troon, I suppose, without sounding cruel, I think it's fair to say it's nobody's favorite Open venue. I would also probably say it's not many people's least favorite Open venue. So, it's kind of just one of the other ones. It's not necessarily considered a great course, but perhaps it would be if these next 6 holes were replicated, or there were more of those, because they're a lot of fun, and particularly the 8th hole, the Postage Stamp, which by the end of the week, I mean, if you're having a drink every time someone says Postage Stamp, you're going to be in big, big trouble. It could play under 100 yards from the forward tee to a very narrow but long green. I was watching a podcast earlier with Billy Foster and a few other caddies, and he showed his yardage book from when he last caddied here, which I presume was 2016, and he'd drawn his own big red line across the front third of the green. And I presume he was with Westwood then, before he moved to Fitzpatrick. But his whole thing was, right, we have to clear this line. There's no coming up short of this line. And you got the coffin bunker. I think there are 5 bunkers in total around the green, all of them hard to escape from. I believe in practice back in 2016, Rory ran up a 7 and an 8 on a 100-yard hole. So I guess it calls to mind the new hole they built at Hoylake last year and the problems that caused. But this is more dramatic in every way, because it's shorter, it's probably tougher, it's certainly more severe, and the green, although probably in like surface area it might be bigger, in actuality it's one of those greens that actually the target, kind of Augusta style, the target is a small part of the green rather than the green itself. It's a
It's
great hole.
interesting that you mention Augusta style. So let's talk a little bit about 8. It's to me, I think a Postage Stamp. I would think of a very square green when it's really not that. It's a very narrow and long green. It gets a little bit wider, I believe, at the back than it does the front. One of the more for a course that maybe everyone doesn't like, and it maybe isn't the most memorable on the Rota, maybe one of the most memorable par threes in terms of the options that you have there in the Open Championship. We've seen some huge numbers. You mentioned Rory in a practice round. I know Tiger tripled this hole, I believe, in one of the recent Opens. Greg Norman basically lost the Claret Jug on this hole when he made bogey. A player carded a 15 on this hole before in the Open. So you can kind of go bunker to bunker. You have that option. But here's the thing that I think sort of makes it great is it's one of those par threes where you think about it a lot before you get to it. You know when it's coming up. You can kind of feel its presence. And that reminds me of 12 at Augusta. You know it's sort of coming up soon. It's not defined by distance like 12 at Augusta. And I think every player uniquely comes into the week with a pretty simple plan at this hole. Play to the middle of the green. You know where you need to hit it. But it's a bit of a temptress. Like you get there on that elevated tee and you see the pin and it may be 120 yards from you. And it makes every player sort of stop there and look at their caddy and think, like, I know we had a plan, but are you sure? Like, I think I can pull this off. And everyone sort of thinks about it. And that's the mark of a really great golf hole is you can have a plan and you stand there and you look at that pin, you think you can make it happen. And a lot of times you can, and it's the difference maker. And a lot of times you can't. So you can have very much a plan heading into it, but it is begging you to take it on from that elevated tee, and the wind sort of plays those tricks on it. It really is just one of those sort of memorable holes, and there will be a ton of coverage of it this week and no shortage of the terminology, as you mentioned. But I'm excited for it. But really the other 5 holes within this second 6, we'll call it Act 2, are all par 4s. And while the first 6 holes only featured 3 par 4s and they were all under 400 yards, all of these 5 par 4s are over that mark, including 10 and 11, which are going to cause players fits. They're both very hard. They are both blind tee shots, which, given the wind, a lot of players don't love. 11 sort of plays along the railway there. It's 498 yards, usually into a wind, a completely blind tee shot over gorse where you can't even really see the fairway. I believe in 2016, they said it was the most difficult scoring hole the entire year in pro golf. They've added 16 yards to it this year. You make that turn and you've kind of just got to hold on for dear life for a couple holes, and it's going to give players fits, isn't it?
It really is, yeah, especially if the wind is as it tends to be. But to be honest, those holes in particular, just after around 8, 9, 9's tough too, but 9, 10, 11 in particular, if it's calm, you're still not really expecting to walk out of those with birdies. And that's kind of the nice thing about the rhythm of the course. Again, I think it's probably, I'm not a golf course architecture expert. I
Sure.
sort of give the pulpit to others on that. But for me, like, sometimes there's a difference between there is a difference between the routing and the way a course plays sort of rhythmically, and sometimes I think Troon suffers for its lack of spectacular holes visually, and I think a lot of people who play Troon feel underwhelmed versus people who see it on TV where it's a bit different. And on TV, really, when we're watching the best players in the world, we just want to see them made a bit uncomfortable. And those holes in particular will do that. So they might not be the most fun to play. They might not be the most dramatic to look at. And the bunkering is, I think Troon, a lot of people say the secret to Troon is staying out the bunkers, but that's early on. That's when you're trying to build your score in particular. But anyway, back to 10 and 11. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They make golfers uncomfortable. They'll be trying to play for very conservative targets, and off the tee, they can't even see them. So it's tough. And that's where things, those guys who are 6, 7 under standing on the 10th tee, which I do think we'll see, they'll be wishing they could just skip to the clubhouse at this point. And that's a fantastic dynamic. It's kind of the opposite actually of Augusta, where all of us every year with our Masters bets, right? You get to the turn, you get through 10, and you still got that hope that your guy who's 1 over par could finish 3 under and get his way back into the tournament. And it's kind of the opposite here.
Talk to me a little bit about misses, right? So you missed the fairway at the Scottish Open this week, and you can really get away with it. Like, it's not that bad just off the fairway. And you saw it, unless you miss where Sahith Theegala missed it on 18, which was a million miles right. It's pretty fair. Are we talking deep fescue? Are we talking like gorse where we're going to see these lost balls and it just gets stuck in there? Or do you think the rough is playable for the most part at Troon?
I've heard it's bad,
Okay.
and we'll see. It's kind of the thing you at the moment with the way golf is and the way the weather's been here. Like last year, we got we had a really dry summer, and then we had a little bit of rain in the run up to Hoylake, and so you got that the worst of both worlds. The rough hadn't really been able to thicken, and yet the course wasn't really firm and fast. It was firm enough. I dare say
Mhm.
firmer than it will be this week. We have had a miserable summer. It has rained, non-stop. It feels like we've had very few breaks in that. So there is no way this is going to. You'd think Carnoustie 2018, not a chance, nothing like that. But the thing that comes with that is that the rough is not burnt. The rough is not, dying. It should be pretty lush, and I believe they have left it to try and wrestle back because, again, we get hung up on scoring. Probably 2016, you can say is just a complete anomaly. Two players just played so well, it
Yes.
doesn't matter, and in many ways we should just celebrate that. But I do think the way that they've had 8 years now to see golf evolve, and they probably don't want someone to shoot 20 under again, right?
Yeah.
Unless they produce a performance akin to Stenson. So something maybe a bit tougher than that in terms of the misses. I've already mentioned the bunkers. I mean, the bunkers, they are very penal.
Yeah.
But the rough, I think, is going to be more challenging than we saw last year. That's the number one line, and more challenging than St Andrews as well.
Yeah, the bunkers, I think, really come into play a lot in the fairway in these final 6 holes, as well as you sort of turn and head back inland. Heavily contoured and bunkered 13th hole. That is difficult. Those pot bunkers, like I mentioned, are pretty much, you get to the front side of them or the side closest to the hole, and you've kind of got to come out sideways. They are a real penalty and hazard. 15 is a 502-yard par 4 that is likely back into a little breeze. 16 is your really last chance to make birdie and make up some ground on the par 5 there. They've lengthened it by about 20 yards, but it should not be overly, the players should be able to get there. 17, though. 242 yards they have it listed, which is up 22 yards, is a par 3. It is a smallish green to begin with for a par 3 that is nearing 250 yards. You're playing into wind, and this green has some heavy runoffs, which effectively make the landing area much smaller than even the square footage of the green. It's a little bit of an upside down bowl and has some of those runoffs. And then you have 18, which is 458. The pot bunkers are brutal and a real penalty there, and the rough can be, but you find yourself in the fairway, and par should be fairly attainable, but a really tough final 6-hole stretch. And then you're ready for a strong whiskey on the 19th hole. Do you have anything there to sort of add about the final 6 closing, conclusion of Royal Troon?
No, very well summed up. I mean, it'd be interesting to see the contrast between 8 and 17 and how they play scoring wise, given the vast, it's a good wedge between them in terms of the length on the scorecard. The other thing probably that I haven't mentioned yet is that I do think one of the things I like about Troon and probably stops it from being one of my sort of least favorite open courses is that it does give you options off the tee. And most open courses do that. Probably less so St Andrews now, actually, where you've pretty much encouraged for the most part to hit driver.
Yeah.
But Troon doesn't, and certainly over those closing few holes, it's one of the things I like about Open Championship golf. Again, I was listening to earlier about when Padraig Harrington won his first Open, and he eagled the 17th hole, and it may have been his second Open. I think it was his first. No, it was his second, wasn't it, when he beat Poulter? Anyway, he eagled the 17th hole, and they took 5 wood off the tee because they were going to lay up. And it hit a downslope, went 60 yards, and they were able to go for the green. But you do have some holes, and 16 is probably one of them, where you can see that sometimes the first shot will be shorter than the second shot in terms of the distance covered in the end. And there are a lot of options here. You will see a lot of irons off the tee. I don't think anybody will go and try and get properly on the front foot here and sort of bludgeon it, even though as I said, it might be pretty soft. But it's always hard, isn't it, to really know how it's going to play until I'm sure we'll get the videos coming soon of people dropping balls. But even then, until we get to lunchtime on Thursday, we'll get an idea then of what the sort of winning score is going to be.
100%. And, it's only 7,300 plus yards, I believe. It doesn't seem like a course that you can really just overpower. You look at that leaderboard from 2016 and it's diversified. It's an eclectic group of different styles. I feel like this almost at every Open, but it feels like it's a course where anyone can win. It favors wit. It favors brave players with distinctive attributes. Is there a specific skill set that you're sort of honing in on, or is it a much broader range at a course like this?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but no, not really.
I know, me too.
And it's one of the things I love about the Open, right?
Yeah,
It's probably one of the ones where if you look at the guys I've selected down the years, there'd be the broadest range of player profile within them. Above all else, the one thing that is pretty common with Open champions is that they have played well in the Open before. And there are a few exceptions. Obviously, Morikawa hadn't had the opportunity to. But Shane Lowry had been ninth a fair few years before. Cam Smith was interesting because I think he'd been sort of inside the top 10 through 54 holes of the previous two and faded a bit, but he'd felt what it was like to tee off pretty late on Sunday. Brian Harman's Open record the last 4 years just been getting better and better. Jordan Spieth, had gone close at St Andrews. Henrik Stenson, obviously. Phil Mickelson had figured it out. So that's the thing you can keep coming back to. And there are players who simply don't have good Open records who will still be towards the top of the betting. And obviously in Ludwig Åberg, who could very well arrive there on the back of a win, he's going to have to do a Morikawa. He could of course do that, but it's an interesting thing to consider.
Absolutely. You mentioned Open Championship experience, extremely important. Almost all the last 10 winners have posted a top 10 in a previous Open before winning. Major championships, like we get to see 3 of them as a benefit now before the Open, has also proven really important. Like you have to play well in the first 3 majors has historically been a metric that you can kind of correlate to success at the Open. There's some really good players, and we'll talk about a few in a moment, who have just been bad in the majors this year. Rahm, Wyndham Clark, Koepka, Spieth, they've all been really bad in the first 3 majors. But let's start to dive into some players. I'm going to bring up the odds board here, Ben, and I know that you have your article coming out probably early next week, which everyone will look to, but I'll give you some of my sort of tips and takes and see if you have anything to add or some leans on certain players. We've got to start with Scotty Sheffer up there at plus 460 is the best number currently available. This is oddschecker.com, which is going to show you some different sort of options here, books we have in the US, but won his last start, obviously an epic season. Does it cause you any concern for Scheffler, regardless of the price, that he does not seem to enjoy? And he spoke about this at Pinehurst, the randomness of some of the native areas where there is an increased variable of luck involved at a place like Pinehurst. Just 2 finishes though this year outside of the top 10 and 15 starts. Does that narrative that the Open brings in a little bit of that secret spice where you could be 1 yard apart from another ball and be screwed in one of these pop bunkers, or you could be totally fine? Does that bother Scheffler, you think?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think it's potentially really significant. I wrote about it last week actually, that the thing he does better than anybody else is control. And this type of golf takes away control. And the PGA Tour, whatever you think of it, whether wherever you are on that scale, one of the things it allows you to do is take control.
Yes.
Generally speaking, sometimes it's nobody's fault. Sometimes it's just the weather and where they go at what time of year. But it's also the type of golf course they select. And for the most part, there is a variety on the PGA Tour, and I don't want to give the impression that I think every course is the same, because it's complete falsehood. But you are able to take control if you're a player like Scheffler. And the thing that he does so much better than anybody else, he controls first off the tee. His misses tend not to be wide, and then with his approach shots, I mean, has anybody ever been as good, bar Tiger Woods, I would say, at hitting the ball pin high? But when you take away that, getting it pin high at the Open doesn't mean landing it pin high, and that's the difference. So, look, he's Scotty Scheffler. If he goes and wins the Open, we're not going to be surprised. But the fun thing is seeing him face that challenge, because I know he can do everything else in golf. This is the only thing I don't know whether he can do it.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to find out, but I'm not going to be parting with any money to find out. That's for sure.
I agree with you. I don't think that's built into the price. He's plus 450 to win the Masters or the US Open, where many of those additional variables like gorse, like a bad lie, like pot bunkers, like weather draw are not factored into that price, in which case I don't think it's a great bet and not something I'd really be here for anyways. Next up is Rory, right there around 8-1. I actually went back. I listened to a little bit of Rory's presser from 2016, and it was funny. He was quite brash. I don't know that I've ever quite heard him like that, but it was in the lead up to the Olympics where he had talked about he's not really here to grow the game. He had no interest in the Olympics. And of course he reversed course the following year, but talked about how he didn't like it. He was also, they were bringing up Jordan and Jason Day and DJ. And I think he felt kind of slighted because he kind of chirped back and said, I've got 4 majors and they have a long way to go to catch me. We're 8 years later, still at 4 majors. He's 1 month from Pinehurst. Are you concerned at all that not only scar tissue, that this may still be an open wound for Rory, or do you think he's ready to bounce back in a big way?
I don't know. I really don't know. I will say he is phenomenally resilient. He really is. And I don't think people say it enough. He's the most likely player in this golf tournament to be in the mix on Sunday. I think that's absolutely certain. 6 top 10s his last 8 opens. He was inside the top 6 here against a pretty big draw bias in 2016. It's not going to be firm. I mean, he's proven now that he can play firm, but he probably would prefer it to be a bit more like Hoylake was when he won there. He's got everything going for him. He's in the middle of playing well in Scotland. He's faced up to the media now. He's spoken about it. I don't think there'll be that many more questions next week about it. Not about Pinehurst specifically, anyway.
Yeah.
It's a shame because I would like to hear him talk about the club choice on 15, which he didn't really do the other day. But that's perhaps we should all move on. But look, I have no idea how he really feels. I suspect better than most people think he does. Yeah, and I do think, he's a professional sportsman who's been at the top of his profession for 15 years. And I think the part of what allows you to do that or enables you to do that is that you're so good at getting back on the bike and process and things like that. So he'll just go and prepare in the same way he always does. And we won't get our answer to that question until very late on in the tournament if he has a chance to win it. But if you're asking me who the most likely winner is, I think for every tournament so far this year, the answer's been Scheffler. Here, maybe it still is, but it's negligible because we know Rory can do this. Scheffler doesn't have to prove anything on Sundays, but look, he's got a huge chance to play well again.
Yeah. His career is sort of marked by 4 weeks a year, which is tough for anyone. But I think we don't give him enough credit for being one of the top players and being the biggest name in the sport in 2016. And you look at those other names around him at the time, and he's still the one doing it at a premier, at worst, top 3 level in the entire world. So maybe a little bit more credit. Interesting 2 guys next on the board, both at 14-1, both major champion winners this year. I'm talking about Xander Schauffele and Bryson DeChambeau. Vastly different Open Championship pedigrees for both. Both are at the exact same odds price. Xander has been in 5 of his 6 appearances. They both played 6 Opens. Xander has 5 finishes, 26 or better. He's been very good and very consistent, which is kind of the moniker of his game in general. Bryson, 5 of his 6 Opens have been 33rd or worse. He has not played well here. He has not seemed to finish it. Only 1 top 20 in the Open in the last 6 years. Where do you stand on Bryson? Do you think it's possible to win Troon with his strategy of I'm going to hit it 330? I know that I'm going to only hit 40 to 45% of fairways like I did at Pinehurst. Do you think that can win out at this type of course?
I think it'll be hard, but the one thing I'll say about Bryson is that if you'd have asked me at the start of the year, I would have said, well, yeah, he might have a chance at Valhalla, but the other 3 majors, no. And he's contended at Augusta and he's won at Pinehurst. And he deserves enormous credit for that because, whatever you think of him, he has always been exceptional. Like again, that gets lost a little bit. But he was exceptional when he was 20 years old. Everybody knew that this kid was special, and he has like an X factor that's really hard to pin down. But he also has this, like, one of the things that he has in common with Koepka, actually, like he has this real desire to be as good as he can be, like a hyper competitive person. And I know you could probably say that about most elite golfers, but I think there are levels to this, and I think his is extraordinary. And he has solved the problems that I didn't think he would necessarily be able to solve. So I couldn't, in good faith, sit here and say he won't crack this one. But I don't think I'd be interested in betting him at the shortest price he'll have been for a major this year. So that's the point to remember, I guess. In other words, I think the ship probably sailed at Pinehurst.
Yeah, we're at Saturday before. I'm not gonna reach for any of these guys right now. I have some interest in Schley, probably over DeChambeau, but there's something about Bryson where he's able to sort of tunnel vision these big moments, and you saw it at Pinehurst, and really rise to the occasion. And while he was so hyper aware of everything that was going on around him at the course, and engaging with fans and being personable and smiling at people, he was able to sort of really lock in. And that's kind of a little bit still of a question mark for me with Schley, is when the biggest moments and the pressure is at a climax. Does his game respond? And he sort of answered that bell at Valhalla, so maybe I should give him a little bit more credit. Right around the same number there. You mentioned him earlier. Let's talk about Ludwig Oberg. Doesn't check the box. No Open Championship experience, but he hasn't had it in the other three majors. Second miscut, 12th in the three majors. Late in 2023, I have in my notes here that he played 3 straight weeks on the European Tour and played very well. 10th at Wentworth, 4th at the Czech Masters, and then won the Omega European Masters, which was in Switzerland. Are we going to give him, is he so good that we should give him a free pass and consider him to win the Open?
Probably. The trouble is, I suppose he's probably quite possibly about to win the Scottish Open at the same odds. And that for the, one of the things we have to accept when we come to majors is, you're going to get better value in worse events. That's just how it works.
Sure.
But we still want to find the winner, right? And the one thing I would say about him, it's really curious, is that, again, kind of the opposite of Bryson. You would think that Valhalla would have been the one for him this year. Really,
yeah.
He's a young player. He lacks experience. He's like a laser ball striker. That's just going to be perfect for him, and it didn't work out. And yet he went to Augusta for the first time and contended. And then he played Pinehurst. I think he'd been to Pinehurst before, but the point is, it's this very different style of golf, and contended again. He's potentially about to win the Scottish Open. Players have gone back to back before. There's not a lot I can say to put anybody off. I suppose his driver probably won't be as big a weapon, and 2, he's not awful around the greens. It's not a Hovland-like question mark, but it's definitely I think if you're being hypercritical, that's what ultimately lost him the US Open on Saturday when his short game was tested. Bit of bad luck as well, but for now, I just let him win is the bottom line. And like you, actually, of those, I'd probably go Rory 1, Schley 2 of those top 5, and the other 3 don't really interest me at all.
Okay, then we get into the 20s, Ben. You've got Morikawa there. You've got Rahm. You've got Hovland. You've got Fleetwood. I think that a lot of people are going to sort of gravitate to this range and seeking a little bit of value in their return. To me, Rahm's still the most talented of the bunch. But, it's funny because if people want to call into question, where is Rory at mentally? What about Jon Rahm? I mean, he looks stricken with intense buyer's remorse. Hasn't won on Live. I think he's T11 heading into the final round there in Valderrama, but best finish at any major this season is T45, and that was at the Masters as defending champion. Does have a second place at last year's Open, albeit he was never really going to win that tournament. Where are you at with Jon Rahm? Do you see some value in like a 25-1 price, or is things outside of the golf course affecting him so badly that you just are in stay away mode?
The price is getting to the point where I become tempted.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, Joe, many of your listeners and viewers won't know, but I was on him at Augusta, stupid.
Me
And I
too.
was on him in the PGA, stupid. So, yeah, it's hard because, his price is only going to keep getting bigger until he does something better. I think hopefully, his performance, I kind of thought he might come out and win at Valderrama. I know it's not a perfect course for him. He may yet if he shoots 62 on Sunday, but it doesn't look like it's gonna happen for him there. Yeah, I've been sort of thinking, well, even if he regrets it, this is the path he's chosen, and at some stage he will accept that this is his short-term future, and
Right.
we will see the real Jon Rahm in a sort of defiant way. But that's kind of not substantiated by any on-course evidence at the moment. So,
Yeah.
yeah, he's the hardest one to weigh up because clearly he is a better golfer than all of those players you've mentioned.
Yeah.
To see, I saw a fairly pithy tweet that, he might be the same price for the Open as Robert McIntyre and Tommy Fleetwood. And that in some ways is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
But this
He
is the
might be the
time we're
same.
in. It's today, isn't it? We got to judge him on today. And that's, yeah, he probably deserves it in that respect.
He could be the same price as one of his teammates over there in Tyrrell Hatton, who was far less. I don't think Tyrrell got 500 million to join Live, but playing very well. He was a name when I started to initially do my research and look at the odds board. I'm like, where's Tyrrell? Like, I kind of want a piece of that, but then I see 30-1. It feels a bit short to me. But a T5 at the Open here in 2016 still his best performance in any major championship and his best result was in it. And I had him at a huge price at Pinehurst, but got crushed on Sunday. He lost 4 strokes putting, kind of ejected out of there. I thought he was going to really take it hard. And then, for what it's worth, we got to give credit where it's due. Bounced back the next week and won in Nashville on the Live Tour. T9 at Augusta sort of checks that box. In when you pile that in with what he did with Pinehurst. Okay, this guy's playing well in 2 of the 3 majors. He's got a win technically this season, and he's got good form at this course, and he seems like a player fit to play very well at an Open Championship. Thoughts on Tyrrell and where you're at with him this week?
Yeah, this will be just about the shortest price he's been for a major. He very rarely gets any lower. But I tipped him for this 3 years ago at 33-1 at Royal St George's, expecting him to play well, and he didn't. I think it's too easy to look at Tyrrell, and who I really like, look at him and think that his on-course chatter is diminishing his potential. I don't actually think that's true.
Right.
But what I do think, I think this will sound sort of incongruous maybe, but I think there is a mental problem, but it's not that part of it. There is a problem that he has not yet managed to work out how you save around when it goes wrong at the highest level. I don't think really, but I don't think it's to do with admonishing himself for bad shots, because that's part of him, and it's probably quite important that he keeps doing that. But it's hard to separate those two things, I suppose. But that would be my main concern. He was, as you say, his best major technically was here, and yet he never had a chance to win. And actually, I suppose the one time he's teed off on a Sunday with a chance to win was Shinnecock.
Yeah.
Everything else he's done it. And even then, that didn't last very long. It came courtesy of that big Saturday. I think he was one of the big Saturday movers, wasn't he? But anyway, the point is he's never really felt what it's like to be in the mix for a major. And that's quite rare among players at 28, 32. You mentioned Tommy Fleetwood. He has felt that, and I would say that almost makes Hatton unique, but he's definitely one of the live golfers who comes here with his game in the best shape,
So I've got a little bit of an addiction to betting a certain player in majors that I can't seem to get away from. And this number's floating, Ben. I'm seeing now 40. I had someone DM me earlier that they took an odds boost and got it up to 50-1. I'm talking about the most prolific major championship winner of the last 10 years in Brooks Koepka. So, it's interesting to me that he hasn't really played very well at Opens, because he did spend those sort of formative years coming up through the Challenge Tour. It does seem like he's mentally built to handle the examination that an Open Championship would require, theoretically. T4 at Portrush is still his best finish. I'm troubled by some of the metrics and what I see from what he's doing, not only on Live right now, but in the Open Championship historically. But I still believe in the talent. I trust the guts. I know that he's put the blade putter that he won all of his major championships with back in the bag now. He did not play the first 3 majors. He had switched to sort of a mallet style putter. I don't know that that makes a strokes gain difference, but I think from a confidence standpoint, I'm happy that it's there, right? It started off Thursday at Pinehurst, like 3 under on the front, and it just felt like everyone was like, buckle up. Here we go again. Brooks is going to be in this thing, and he's ready to win a U.S. Open. Couple bad mistakes that he uncharacteristically compounded, and looked like he lost focus, which troubled me a little bit. But I want to give him some credit here because I was impressed with the fight at the PGA and the U.S. Open. Brooks Koepka is not a player that you would expect who has an early morning Saturday tee time at a major to bring his best stuff, and he kept fighting. Finished better, gained strokes in round 4 in both of those while completely out of those tournaments. And you know it pisses him off beyond belief to be where he was at, but he stayed in the game. The price has just continued to float up. Is there any hope for you? Is it someone that you have consideration in backing if the number gets into the 40s?
Yeah, you have to, don't you? You have to. You're playing with money in the bank. I've never got him right in the majors, which is quite impressive when you think he's won 5 of the things. But he could definitely pop up, couldn't he? I mean, he actually recovered from a pretty bad start at Valderrama as well. As far as I need to look closer at that. It's Brooks Koepka at 40. You know, it has to be tempting. He's played okay in it as well. I mean, you referenced Portrush. I remember Birkdale, the year Jordan Spieth won. He was very much up there early on. And I think it was like the back end of the Friday round, he had a couple of things go against him that just put him on the back foot. But Shinnecock was open-like in some ways.
Yeah.
I know we're not talking a firm and fast test this week, but similar principles really. Patience and taking your medicine and playing away from flags sometimes, and it might be playing away from bunkers here, but it's similar principles. If you can do majors or you can't in some cases. You don't need me to tell you that he can. So 40 to 1. He'll have loads of people backing him, no doubt.
Okay. I think Portrush, he got JB Holmes and got frustrated by the slow play from Holmes. But all right, so a couple of American players that I think are also going to be popular here in the 40s. I'll give you the one that I like and tell me if you agree or disagree. Thomas, Cantlay, Finau. I actually like Tony Finau. I got a 50 to 1. Top 20 in 2 majors this year, including a T3 at Pinehurst, albeit that he wasn't really in contention, played well on Sunday there. He's really kind of coming into form of late. 5th at the Travelers, T3 at the U.S. Open, 8th at the Memorial, and the week before that. The irons are really starting to sort of groove for Tony Finau. Gained 26 strokes on approach in his last 5 starts alone. I saw he traveled over to Scotland yesterday to sort of get some early prep in, although I was kind of hoping he would play the Scottish Open. He's not. Been pretty decent at the Open here historically in the different courses that they've played. The big thing for me is 3 consecutive starts for him gaining strokes with the putter. And it's not a lot, Ben, but using a little bit of a longer putter now and sort of switch to this claw group has kind of found something. It may not seem significant like he's gaining a ton, but when you put into context that he was getting destroyed with the putter earlier in the season and the 6 starts prior to gaining in these last 3, it's a little bit encouraging for me. The slower greens at the Open, multiple top 10s in the past. He actually finished inside the top 20 in 2016 here. Had a -4 opening round and then sort of faded, although he was sort of one of those names up there early on Thursday. 50 to 1 mark. I like Finau the best of these 3, although I know Thomas has played very well early this week and Cantlay great at the last major. Your thoughts if you think I'm on the right guy there or you have a different opinion?
Yeah, I think you're probably on the right guy. I think Finau, like you said, the problem is, can you imagine him putting quite well enough? I don't like to focus on putting really, but there are certain guys where you think, well, you're definitely not going to be like, your ceiling might be 25th in strokes gained putting. So you've got to play very well to win with that. It's not impossible by any means. But what I would say for me, I think he's probably the most underrated iron player of this generation, because he never gets mentioned as one of the, probably him and Russell Henley. Like, they just don't get mentioned in those conversations with Morikawa, with Scheffler, with Thomas. And you know, Finau is so good, and I suppose with him it's because we think of his power and his athleticism. Anyway, the other thing he's really underrated at is his work around the greens. Like, he's a really imaginative player. He's a field player, and those players, you know, it's not a surprise that he's done so well in the Open. As you mentioned, he played well here in 2016. That was his first go at it. And I think a third of his majors he's finished in the top 10. He's played in 30 odd. That's a serious record. There'll be people. It's almost the Westwood effect. He's been on so many major leaderboards that people might feel like they're losing patience, when actually, if you've been backing him for all of these majors, you shouldn't. It should be the opposite. You should be very, very happy with the run he's given you. You know, just one thing missing, and yeah, I suppose he's not won for a little while now. That's still a bit of a doubt with him, isn't it? But you're getting paid at the price, because what is he? Current form, top 10 player. So yeah, and he's probably 15th in the bank.
You know, he's very underrated for not only his iron play, but he's a shot maker too. I mean, he can hit it both ways. He can flight it very low, which sometimes can be advantageous, especially if you're talking about 25, 30 mile an hour winds. He's got a multitude of shots in the bag that he can deploy. 50 to 100-1, we start to get in these odds. You know, that there's a mark where you really don't want to be outside the top 30 in opens historically in terms of winning, but there are a couple players that are still within that I think have a chance. There's one, his numbers are all over the place. Before, when I started doing the research on Thursday, 65 to 1, down to 30 in some spots. I took it. Top 40 in every major since 2023. So the last 7 consecutive majors, he's been inside the top 40, coming off a T6 at Pinehurst, which was his best. He's got a win earlier this season, top 5 at the Players, 8th at the Memorial. He's been quite good and consistent, and he kind of got stuck in that bad weather draw in 2016. He shot 79 on Friday in the toughest of conditions. But I like Hideki Matsuyama, especially if the price, it's really a price-dependent play. If you're in 55 to 65 to 1, I think that it makes some sense. It's sort of, you mentioned this earlier as well, as sort of the profile of an Open Championship winner, I would say maybe to a larger degree, is a little bit older than the other major championships. You know, he's 32 now. You look at Stenson, Harmon, Lowry, Molinari, Zach Johnson, Phil, Ernie Els, Darren Clark. These are like some of the guys who have won the last 10. They're right around this sort of mid-30 range. This will be his 10th Open Championship that he's competed in. 65 to 1 I took on Hideki. Do you have any thoughts there, or anyone else in that range that may be of consideration for you?
I think, Hideki, you summed it up perfectly when you said it's the value play. Like, it's very hard, as I said, in majors to get real value about elite golfers that are very well known to the market. But with Hideki, you probably are getting it. The reason you're getting it is possibly that his Open record is kind of not. It's become underwhelming, you know. Like, when he came, he played his first Open, he finished 6th at Muirfield. That was the first time I went to the Open working, actually, and he was so impressive. And I'm sure a lot of people remember the slow play penalty that he was very cruelly awarded in that. And since then, he's just had a few where he's been on the fringes and not really taken it the next step. And I think I'm right in saying he skipped it in 2021 to prepare for the Tokyo Olympics. Again, not a criticism, but it may just, you know, some players wouldn't miss an Open Championship, whatever. So that's kind of, you know, obviously missed the cut in Scotland, albeit very narrowly with a good second round. He's one of those handful, and I do mean handful, there aren't many, where if they won, a lot of people would be, sorry, what? They'd be saying, you know, sorry, he was 66 to 1. And certainly you go back to the Masters, people were falling over themselves to take 25 to 1. And he's really maintained his form. Until Scotland, he'd maintained his form. And the one thing I will say about Scotland is that he never plays well at the Renaissance. So, yeah, there are reasons to believe, certainly.
Yeah, before I get into some really long shots here, there's one name that I'll mention, and I'm going to post this show on Saturday. So if you're watching this before the final conclusion of Scotland, here's a name that I think is going to drop, assuming he has a good Sunday. There are 75 to 1s on Sung Jae Im for next week that I don't think last if he plays well tomorrow. He's gained over a stroke per round each week on approach, and that's really where he's gotten himself back to Sung J M. 12th or better in 6 of his last 8 starts, which doesn't include the Scottish Open, where he's likely to finish inside that top 12 as well. T20 at the Open last year, he seems to have gotten all the around the green game stuff back. The iron play is really trending in a positive direction. He's gaining strokes in every major statistical category through 3 rounds in Scotland. So, if he's in 4th right now. If he finishes inside the top 5, I think that price probably plummets inside of 50 to 1. You may be able to get some closing line value there. A couple of the other names I'm just going to mention is extreme long shots that I have. A price on Matthew Pavon, which I think is like around 150 to 1. The guy's been, T12 at Augusta, 5th at a U.S. Open. He was in the final pairing at Pinehurst less than a month ago and actually outplayed Bryson DeChambeau in the final round. He shot a better score than him. 6th at the Dunhill this year, 1 on the European Tour, the Open de España. Highly volatile putter. For instance, he lost 7.5 strokes putting at Valhalla, which is very tough, and then gained 7 at Pinehurst. It's kind of what I want at 150 to 1. If you're going to take that as someone who has the ability to really spike, but I think as a player with a lot of confidence, checks the box of a win this year. He won on a coastal course off of California there at the Farmers. Also played really well at a rainy coastal course at Pebble, where he finished 3rd on the coast. It's his first Open since he qualified since 2017. I believe that Pavon is going to play in. 150 to 1 is a big price. And then enlighten me a little bit, because people are telling me about Tom McKibben. Do you have anything on him? I think I see 175 to 1. Played in Pinehurst, top 40, I believe there. He really seems to be trending in a right direction on the DP World Tour. Is he someone you maybe have your eyes on, or does he have a lot left to go in terms of Open Championship experience before you're willing to card him?
Yeah, I'm probably telling you something you already know, but this he's a superstar. He's going to go right to the top, right? But he's still very young. On the European Tour, he's probably I would say he's the best player in Europe at the moment of those who don't have a PGA Tour card. Better than Rasmus Højgaard, for instance, who also doesn't have a PGA Tour card at the moment. Similar age. Again, for those who don't know, he comes from the same golf club as Rory McIlroy, Hollywood, which they know how to make him. And he's no doubt he'll be playing a practice round with Rory, who's been a bit of a mentor to him. He has all the potential. He's a phenomenal driver of the ball. Like, he's a guy who can
long or accurate or both.
Both.
Okay.
He's one of the most impressive drivers. It is as if the good folks at Hollywood decided to try and clone Rory McIlroy and did a very, very good job at it. He's wiry and taller than Rory, but he's a real star in the making. With he's sort of mature, and the way he speaks, it's like he knows how good he is. Is he going to win the Open? Probably not. It's his debut in the Open. He didn't play great in the Scottish. Sometimes we think, oh, he's from Northern Ireland, he'll be a great links golfer. And actually, Rory took a while. I know Rory obviously could have won the Open in 2010 at St Andrews had he been a bit more fortunate, but his Open record was poor. He famously said, I think the year after, that he's not really a fan of links golf. I would say McKibben is probably more likely to go and win a USPGA than an Open. So that's where I am with him. He will be on the PGA Tour next year. You'll learn a heck of a lot more about him. And I'm even pretty hopeful he might be beating a few Americans at Bethpage as well. Very good.
Awesome. That is exactly what I was hoping to get from you, a little bit of insight there on McKibben. Before, I got to mention one more name, just because I'm going to take him top 40 when those numbers come out. He is 700 to 1. Can't win. I think he can make the cut. I have a problem with betting this guy whenever I bet the DP World Tour, but it's Sean Crocker, the American from Long Beach, California. Ben's rolling his eyes if you're not watching this on YouTube. But a couple of good last 3 starts: 21st, 3rd, 20th. He is one hell of an iron player on approach. He cannot putt at all. But, it was Stenson, a great putter. I guess he was pretty good. But Todd Hamilton, really good iron players. Justin Leonard. won in 2022 in Scotland on the other coast there at the Hero Open, second at the Dunhill. He's just a guy that I always sort of gravitate toward, and I may take him just like as a made the cut bet. But he's the furthest name when I just scroll down to the very bottom of the odds board that caught my attention.
Yeah, look, I was on him in Scotland this week and he was rubbish. So,
Yeah, he was.
there was a reason for that. His putting's actually started to show improvement. He's definitely like a sleeping giant of the European Tour. I've been waiting for 3 or 4 years for him to go and, get out of there. I love the European Tour, but
is that his goal? Do you think he likes playing there, or is he just not quite good enough to earn points to play on the PGA Tour? Because it's weird. He's just played exclusively there.
Yeah, I have to imagine that he'd like to get back over to the PGA Tour. He's, not to say he's traveled the world. He's Zimbabwean by birth, and he was actually mental when he came out. Sergio was looking after him, and he played really well in Doha on a sponsor's invite in about 2017. And this is probably too tenuous, but Doha has always been a great, Paul Lawrie's won at Doha, Adam Scott's won at Doha, Stenson's won at Doha, Thomas Bjorn's won at Doha. Brandon Grace has won at Doha. Chris Wood, who nearly won the Open as an amateur, he's won at Doha. It's always been a really good place to go looking for players who can play links golf. Whether that means that Sean Crocker is going to win the Open because he played okay there 6 years ago, I'm not so sure. But he's a talent. You're backing a talent, which is a good start.
700 to 1 DraftKings Sportsbook up right now if you want to take a little roll of the dice. Thank you, Ben. When is the article up this week? I know people will be on pins and needles waiting to see who you tip. I appreciate your time tonight. Tell everyone where they can find your great content heading into the Open Championship.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sportinglife.com/golf. 5 o'clock Monday will be the preview. I've had a rotten year, Joe, on the majors. It's just one of those. Long term, I had Lowry here, I had Cam Smith here, so we're doing okay in the Open. And if I had to pick a major where I feel like I might nail it, it would be the Open. And hopefully that's gonna happen this week.
Good luck to you. I'm rooting for it to come home tomorrow as well. So I hope that you have a great week, Ben. Thank you for your time. You are the absolute best as always. Best of luck. We'll talk soon, friend.
Cheers, Joe. You too. See you soon.
All right. Thanks. All right, guys, that'll do it for this week. Good luck at the Open. I'm going to have this show up nice and early. Check it out. Make sure to like, subscribe, pass it along to a friend, give it a retweet, do whatever you can to help grow the platform. As always, thank you to Rotoballer for sponsoring the show. I will see you guys next week. Best of luck. Good. Have a great experience watching Royal Troon, the last major of the championship of the season. Don't take it for granted. Thanks for checking out Preferred Lines. I'm Joe Idoni. Have a great week. See ya.